Let me tell you the story of how Divinity Original Sin 2 ruined a friendship. Now, before I get into how it ruined the friendship, let me explain to you what is Divinity Original Sin 2. What you're seeing on the screen is gameplay of Divinity Original Sin 2. This is a top-down tactical RPG fantasy style, I would say, single-player game. But in this single-player game, you can have up to 3 other party members. Now, these party members you can control, or you could have other players join in and control those characters, which is how I played the game. Now, I played the game with a group of 2 other friends, and we played on the hardest difficulty. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start labeling them by what type of characters they played. We had the Knight, which is a up-close and personal type of fighter. We had me, who was playing a mage, doing a lot of support and damage spells from the back. And then we had a third player being a rogue, a glass cannon of extreme damage. So when the campaign began, the Knight went ahead and created a save file and invited us to join him and create our own characters. This happened, and we had a 4th slot. And we didn't have a 4th that was playing with us, but we wanted to play on the hardest difficulty. So I ended up playing as 2 mages in the campaign, while the Knight had his own character to deal with and the rogue had his own character to deal with. Now, the great thing about Divinity Original Sin 2 is that the single player can be played with up to 4 players in co-op. But that is where the worst part of the game comes out. Because while it is single-player co-op, you would consider it a little bit multiplayer-esque, but everybody still has their own different single-player playing styles. And that single-player playing style gets carried over into this game. And that's where the problem comes up with different playing styles. Now, these playing styles didn't really come up as an issue until, I would say, the first chapter of the game finished. And when the second chapter opens up, you get introduced to a brand new, massive, huge area that you can explore. And that's when all the problems started to arise. Because up to that point, the game was very difficult. And anything we did, we had to strategize and talk about and plan. And we really cared about the game. And as soon as we got to the next zone, everybody scrammed and basically played single player their own way that they wanted to. Now let me explain what the single player personality types were. We had the Knight. Now the Knight loved the game's story. The Knight played the game to talk to all the NPCs. The Knight played the game to read all the dialogue options. The Knight played the game to make difficult story decisions as a group on who to keep alive, who to kill, and in what order should we be completing quests and how. Now that's fine. I love that. I, for one, who is playing the mage, knew that the game's local file is actually saved on another computer's hard drive. So anything I did within the game ended up not mattering. So I didn't necessarily care for the story or for going off and exploring on my own. What I cared about was the 2 characters that I ended up managing, because I was doing my best to mitigate turn timing. And for those of you who don't know how this game works, it's a turn-based combat. So there is no time limit on your turn. It could be my turn for 5 minutes if I'm sitting there contemplating what to do on my actions. And it was a lot of pressure managing 2 characters. So I did my best to, whenever I had some free time, I would min-max those characters, or I would set their abilities to be perfect, because as soon as combat would happen, I was a tactician. I like difficult games. I like Monster Hunter. I like Dark Souls. I wanted a challenge, and I liked min-maxing my characters and going to the shops and bartering, having my party send me all their useless junk, and I would sell their junk. That was good synergy, and I cared about the tactical part. So I spent I would say the party spent a lot of time waiting for me as I respect my abilities, trying to figure out what's the best way to tackle the next encounter that we're coming up to. And then there was one last player. This player is the rogue. They played as a rogue, and their personality on playing single-player games I would also consider rogue. While the knight went ahead and pushed his exploration with his story as he was talking to everybody, the rogue picked a random direction and ran that way. Sometimes he would discover great things, but most of the time he would trigger combat scenarios, get himself killed, and scream in the mic that we need to reload the game. And this sucked, and it was a actual common problem because I preferred following the knight, and I wanted to push the game forward. I wanted to stay as a group, and I knew if I split up, I would probably get myself in a bad situation and force the guy who's running the game, the knight, to reload. And we had way too many reloads because of this rogue. This rogue would pickpocket things by himself. He would mess up his pickpocketing. He would force us to reload. Sometimes he would pickpocket, send items to our inventory and not tell us, and then in the middle of town, we would get attacked by guards because we had loot in our inventory that was stolen. And, you know, I respect the man for trying to help, but it felt like he did more harm than helpful. Whenever we were in combat, his kind of approach tactic was, I'm going to sprint head first, and I'm just going to go all out with all my attacks. And then on the preceding turns, he was usually the first one to die. He was playing a very ballsy version of the game. So as you could see, as soon as we got into that open area and we could explore and roam wherever we want, I ended up spending a lot of time respecking and doing character stat stuff. The person who cared about the story played the story the night, and the rogue player, he kept running off on his own, getting himself in trouble. The game was very, very fun up to that point, but after that point, the game actually started becoming sour, because every time we'd have to reload, we'd end up losing 15 minutes of progress. So for every 5 minutes, I would tell the knight who's hosting the game, hey, can you autosave just in case we have to go back? Hey, can you save in case we have to refresh? Hey, can you save? And that, of course, got really obnoxious and annoying to do. But another thing that really started triggering the knight and the rogue against each other is that the rogue would sometimes go off and do story or side quests by himself, not like as a group type of thing, which is fine, except he didn't actually care for what the characters had to say, so he would spam the text through and pick any random option, and whatever happened in that story happened. And it was just being done for completion or just to spam click random things. And I could tell that the knight was starting to get very frustrated when he would go over to an area to start or continue a quest, and the people who have given him this quest are dead. So you can see why there was some kind of issue and problem going on, but everything snapped when we were halfway through the second chapter. We were in a combat scenario, and I think what happened is we couldn't decide whether we wanted to run or fight, and the knight went ahead and he just stopped, and he said, hey, rogue, what is your problem? And the rogue stopped, and suddenly the entire combat stopped for 10 minutes as the two people just argued over their playstyles. The rogue was telling the knight that he's too slow and the game is boring, and the knight started yelling at the rogue, telling him that you're not playing as a team and you're actually hurting the game rather than helping it. And after we finished arguing for 10 minutes, we finished that combat scenario, and then we just never came back to the game. Sure, those two people actually ended up, they stopped talking for a month, and then eventually their friendship got better again. But this was a very interesting thing to be looking out from the outside as a third perspective. Because while they yelled at each other for their playing styles, I kind of sat there like, can you guys end your turn so we could finish the combat? And while they were arguing, this is the exact thought I had. And I realized that while Divinity Original Sin 2 is a single-player game that you can play with friends, at the end of the day, it's still a single-player game. And anybody who's playing with you are just kind of borrowing characters that they can play for a bit. I understood this, so I didn't really care what happened to my character or the game. But if you're going in there with the thought that this is an MMO and that this character matters and that any progression that I do, I have to do myself, then that's when the whole kind of play style differences really end up shining. And that's when you start bumping heads, is when you forget that this is a single player game saved to one hard drive and not an MMO that you can bum rush without communicating with your team. Because at the end of the day, it is a co-op game. So that's the story of how Divinity Original Sin 2 ruined a friendship. I made this video because I feel like while it is kind of a stupid topic, I definitely think that other people would also be going through the same thing because of just the way this game is built and how the co-op progression actually works in this game. If you enjoyed listening to this ridiculous story, go ahead and stick that like button and subscribe if you would like to see more ridiculous content like this. But until next time, may you have a fantastic day.
Wait, this...
I'm in a fight.
Oh,
Michael, reload. No. No.